So hello and welcome. Happy Friday. Today is Friday, August the 21st of 2026. This is Backyard Beekeeping Questions and Answers, episode number 368. I'm Frederick Dunn, and this is The Way to Bee. So I'm really glad that you're here. If you want to know what we're going to talk about today, please look down in the video description. You'll see all the topics listed in order and later with timestamps so you can get straight to it if you don't want to listen to everything that's going on today. So speaking of today, I know you want to know what's going on outside, but first I'll tell you how you can submit your own question. You can go to thewaytobee.org, which is my website, and click on the page marked Contact, fill out the form, submit a topic for discussion, something you just became aware of, or send me a question that might show up in a future Q&A. The other thing is, if you've got something to show, you've got a picture, some issue going on with your bees, you want to talk to your peer group, you go to the fellowship. Which fellowship? The Way to Bee Fellowship on Facebook. There you can upload your photo or your video and ask questions and get answers anytime, day or night. And chances are there's someone there from your neck of the woods. Speaking of neck of the woods, where am I located? Northwestern part of Pennsylvania, northeastern part of the United States. And I know you want to know, what's the weather like in that part of the world? Okay, well, I'll tell you. Outside right now, 75.7 degrees Fahrenheit. That's 24 in Celsius. And it's windy in opposite land, 1.1 miles per hour. Very slow. Good news, 55% relative humidity. Why is that good news? Good news because the bees are trying to dry their honey. And lately we've had high humidity, really high. And that makes it hard, challenging. They fan away all night long. It sounds like a dryer vent on the side of your house all night long in the apiary. An apiary is a yard where you keep your honeybees. So, what else? Oh, by the way, this is one of the reasons that if you've got some kind of broodminder scale or something on your hives, they gain weight, they lose weight, they gain weight, they lose weight, up and down, because what's going on, as I just said, 75 degrees Fahrenheit, but what happened at night? Do you know it dropped to 46 degrees Fahrenheit overnight, which is 8 degrees Celsius? And that's when they cluster, they tighten up, and they conserve energy, but they're also doing what? Brooding up, which means they have to keep the brood warm, which means they're consuming the resources they're bringing in. Thank goodness we're in a steady nectar flow. Pretty decent weather ahead. So you're probably wondering, if we're looking ahead, let's say just a week in the northeastern part of the United States. Where you are, of course, it might be different, but what would be the best day coming up in my neck of the woods to go and get into your beehives to pull honey, because that's where we're at right now? Well, it's going to be Wednesday. Because Wednesday, August the 26th, that is going to be the best day out of the next 7. So what would you do? What would you do on Tuesday? The day before, you go and try to pull some honey frames off. Well, you can skew the lid, skew the inner cover, and by that I mean pry it up and twist it a little bit. Because what happens when you get into the hive? You pull things apart, you interrupt some cells that are made by bees out of beeswax, and then the honey dribbles out. Not bad. The bees come and take care of that right away, but you could also cause some robbing. So we need to be aware of that. We don't want to kick off any robbing, so then you close it back up, and then the next day you come back and it's all cleaned up by the bees and recovered by the bees that are resident to the colony that you're opening up. See? Super easy. It's just a quick tip for you. So tomorrow is not a good day. Actually, today was the best day, but it's too late. You're listening to me now, and it's probably already nighttime, so you're not going to run out there and deal with your bees at night. If you do, give somebody else the flashlight. You don't want to be the one carrying that, and you'll find out why really quick. 75% chance of rain tomorrow, so not a good day. Okay, so going on outside, the opening sequences, of course, showed what's going on right now in my neck of the woods. Of course, goldenrod is number 1. The honeybees are all over it, great nectar flow. And we had early goldenrod, which bloomed early. And then we have this other goldenrod that's quite a bit taller, and myself and the grandchildren were out there looking it over. What do you think they call that? Tall goldenrod. It's true. So the goldenrod is still blooming. We still have a lot going on, and the bees are working it really well. Dutch white clover never ends. It's a staple. The bees are getting nectar and pollen from it. It's fantastic. Sunflowers are doing okay. I did not get a great field of sunflowers this year the way I normally do. I don't know about you where you are, but ragweed is causing me issues. Knapweed, it's an invasive, but the bees are on it. There's thistle out there that the bees are on. They're getting nectar from that too. And the cosmos are blooming, but it's moderate. You know, the cosmos more and more when I look at it and think it over. I have to plan ahead for next year. And the cosmos are visited by a lot of bees, but not a lot of honeybees, even though I show them in the opening sequences. It's mostly native bees and native pollinators, so there's nothing wrong with that if you want to plant it for them. But I'm going to shift gears going into next year on the plants that I choose to grow here on my property, and I'll explain why. First of all, if you're planning ahead, and you should, it's a great time to go seed shopping, because if you have garden centers, hardware stores, and things like that that get those seasonal seed displays and stuff like that, they're kind of looking to get rid of that stuff right now, and it's usually profoundly discounted. We know that seed's not cheap. Seed's really expensive, and in the past, just for the sunflowers alone, because of the nectar and pollen that they provide for our pollinators, including those we keep, like the honeybee, they're expensive. I spend hundreds of dollars on seed. Well, that's all over with. I'm not going to do that next year. What am I going to do instead? Am I not going to have sunflowers? No, I'm going to have them. I'm going to have a lot of them. But instead of buying sunflower seed intended for growing, I'm going to just get bird seed, black oil sunflower bird seed. Yeah, because you get, 40-pound bag for $20. I'm going to be planting that because I've seen people do it. I checked in on, it's called YouTube. You should check it out because there's so much good information on it. You can learn how to do things, see how things go, listen to some influencers. But I'm doing it next year, black oil sunflower seed, and the most frequent question I get is, when do you plant, how do you plant, what do you do for soil preparation? Okay, so this is what I'm doing. My soil preparation probably won't change. And so what that involves is mowing close to the ground, of course, near the end of the year, the areas that I'm going to grow stuff on. And in the spring, we'll mow it tight again, but we'll till it. And I know there's a big push for no-till gardening, and that would be great. If it was a vegetable garden or something, small and manageable, I'd be all about it. No-till all the way. But this is a field. So I'm tilling it 2 directions, so that's 2 passes, wait a day, till it again, 2 passes, wait a day, 1 more till. Okay. And the reason I do that is because we keep pulling up seeds and small plants and things that are already there, and we want them to dry out a little bit. We want to reduce competition for the seeds that we're about to plant. And then what I'm going to do, and this is kind of lazy gardening because that's all equipment based, once it's all tilled up, then I'm going to take my 700-pound roller and I'm going to drive it down 1 pass, 1 direction, all of the areas that I tilled. Then I'm going to broadcast birdseed, black oil sunflower seeds. Then, after I broadcast that, when all the wild birds aren't watching me, I'm going to roll it the other way and push it that 1 inch to 1.5 inches down into the ground, which they tell you that you're supposed to have. And then it's going to rain right on cue, a nice soft extended rain that will keep it moist, and sunflowers germinate fast and they send down a taproot really fast. And so I think that's going to work. What are your thoughts? Have you done it before? Let me know in the comment section because I think it's going to work and nothing to lose. Very inexpensive. I can spread a lot of seed. Now I don't want to super overseed, but I think this method is going to work really well. And you might be wondering, what's the value of those sunflowers anyway? Plus they're all going to look alike. So it's going to be this monotonous yellow sunflowers. Every sunflower is probably going to look like the others, where now, see the ones I plant, it's this broad variety of sunflowers, little ones, big ones, tall ones, short ones, red ones, umber, yellow, golden, rusty looking. And then the bees show you what their preferences are, but then when you look up that specific sunflower, it's super expensive. So I'm going with all black oil next year. Let's see what happens. So anyway, the pollen, not that valuable for the bees, and people are going to chime in. Beekeeping nerds are going to say things like, that is not a complete amino profile for your bees. That is not going to be enough to raise brood inside your beehives. Well, that's fine, and here's why. Because it's not the only source of pollen for the bees. So, regardless of its incomplete status, right? Just like dandelions, you get the same thing. You can post it on Facebook, say, save the dandelions, and somebody will say, yeah, it's no good for the bees, it's junk food. And then you say, but it's really good nectar. And that's the same for sunflowers. The nectar flow from the sunflowers is really strong. You might be wondering, oh yeah, well, what's the sugar percentage of that? What if I told you it's 30 to 50% sugar? Compared to a lot of them, which are like 10%, 15%, 30 to 50% sugar from the black oil sunflower seed sunflower. That's good stuff. Don't play games. This is looking good. It's sounding better by the minute. And also, let's talk about that pollen, which is not a complete diet for brood. Yet, did you know, just because it doesn't have high nutritional value, don't underestimate the fact that it may have medicinal value. That's right. It can be a medicinal benefit to your bees. What part of the bee would that affect? How about the midgut area? What's in there? How about nosema? What kind of nosema? Nosema ceranae. It used to be Nosema apis. I know you want to know this, but it was replaced by ceranae. Nosema spores. They grow in the gut. They consume resources that your bees need. They cause sublethal impacts on your bees. So by planting this supersized field, more than 10 feet long, of black oil sunflower seeds, when they get that pollen, nutritionally deficient, medicinally superior. So you get that, healthier bees, and then they can forage farther to get a better pollen source. See how that works? It's really good. And the asters are just starting out, by the way, and that usually kicks in a very good nectar flow, but also it can lead us to some funny smelling honey for some people. I like the smell. I like the taste. Goldenrod, asters, bring it all. I don't mind. I like it. I think it's great stuff. So we're going to jump right in with the questions here. And the very first question comes from, I can't say, Slavkoka Pasov 8134. I'm sorry about that pronunciation, but anyway, it was on YouTube, and that's the YouTube channel name. Second half of August, I go to some bees, and I get half a cup sitting outside the hive all night long. Okay, the weather's nice, 65 to 70 degrees Fahrenheit, which is similar to what we have right now. This year, the swarm got too deep. Some frames in the upper deep is not drawn comb, just foundation. Question, with a small flow in August, why some bees are flying to collect nectar and pollen, while this half cup sits outside doing nothing? Okay, all day, maybe. Okay, but hot inside, but what about at nighttime? Why do they stay? Okay, so I see the same thing sometimes. And so it all comes down to us looking at the bees, why they're doing what they do. And there's a lot of bearding going on, if you don't know what that is, when the humidity in particular is really high, and the bees are trying to dry out their honey, which is exactly what they're doing right now. But lucky for us, we're at 55% relative humidity. And but sometimes recently we've had in the 90s in humidity. So bees do beard outside, but that's pretty predictable. It's nice and even, the whole hive. But every now and again you walk past the hive and there's a little clump of bees right on the front. And just as described in this question, usually when there's a beard out and like you get halfway through the night, they get smaller, 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 and they're gradually moving inside. Some bees clump and stay clumped outside. So you could investigate. There are some jobs inside the hive, and for foragers, that don't require them to go into the hive, and sometimes they even get rejected based on the payload they're bringing in. So let's say a bee is bringing in nectar. Well, a bee that comes in with nectar from a flower's nectaries is going to get in there, going to be invited in, and their resources are going to be stored right away. But because it's super hot, keep in mind, and humid, some bees are also foraging for water. Now, water gets used for a lot of different things. So the water that comes into the hive from a water bee, a water forager, and this has nothing to do with the age of it, it can be a forager of any age. When they bring back water, sometimes they need it, and you'll see trophallaxis, bees will drink it directly from the water bee. Sometimes they even put it in cells, rarely, but sometimes they do. And the other thing is they'll paint it with their tongues over the surface of brood areas and things like that, and the bees will fan it, and then through evaporation they get this cooling benefit inside the hive. So if your temps have been really high, you could have something like that, but 65 to 70 wouldn't kick that off. Now let's say it's a water bee and it shows up and it's got its crop full of water, but nobody wants it. None of the workers collect the water, no one's thirsty, and they don't need to cool the hive. This is just one of many possibilities, but now these water bees just go and park themselves somewhere and do nothing else. Because they can't go and forage for nectar, the nectar would then be diluted and be of no use to the colony. So that's one thing. Those could all be water bees stuck in the corner. And I'm not suggesting you grab them and smash your crops and evaluate the contents. Don't do that. But sometimes you can check them out and find out that there is, on rare occasions, a unmated queen in that little cluster. And unless you scoot them around and look to see what's in that clump, you may not see that at all. So sometimes a tertiary queen emerges from her cell. Myself and the supervisor got into a hive and we had 7 queen cells down one side of one frame, and we selectively removed all of them but one that the bees seemed to favor. Everyone had a queen in it. Now let's say one of those little queens scoots out, nobody cares about it, doesn't cause a swarm, they don't go anywhere and don't lead that queen anywhere, and they don't bivouac on a branch. She parks herself outside, and maybe 10 or 20 bees collect around her and take care of her a little bit. That's one possibility. Sometimes you do find them. But my number one guess is unemployed water bee. What's your guess? Do you know? Have you investigated what's happening? Let's go on with the next question, which comes from William Tautfius. Anyway, in my second year of beekeeping and harvested almost a gallon of honey from last year's frames. I think it has fermented. After extracting, I bottled it all. However, it has a hint of alcohol smell. Is this honey fermented and spoiled? And or how can I be sure? Okay, this is timely. Because although this has already been around, you would already know. If this was harvested from last year and you put it in, leftover honey in spring from winter, and you put it in jars, which is what I highly recommend, particularly those of you who are harvesting honey this time of year, asters, goldenrod, all that stuff, that has a propensity to set or crystallize really fast. So don't let that happen in a big bucket. Get it all in your little jars. Now, sometimes people smell aster honey. They don't like the smell. And it can smell sour or off a little bit. But there are other tells. That's not a standalone thing. So capped honey can, in fact, have too much moisture and it can ferment. Yeast gets into it. There's wild yeast in the air. It gets into it, starts fermentation. But let's say you put it in a jar, and some of you may be able to identify with what I'm about to describe. You processed a bunch of honey, you put it in jars, you put the lids on the jars, you put the jars on the shelf, and later you're going to sell them to a bunch of people because you're going to make a lot of money, which backyard beekeepers earn so much money, so much of a return on their investment. I'm surprised everyone isn't doing it, and I hope you realize that I'm making a big joke there, because even my grandson was asking me, "Grandfather, what is the return on the investment when you buy all your equipment and you sell the honey? How much surplus are you earning?" Okay, so first of all, he doesn't get to know my economic status, but I would have to explain to him, and I actually did, that my costs exceed the income from backyard beekeeping. But that's because I'm not focused on it. I'm not trying to be super efficient. I'm just having fun doing stuff, finding out how things happen. But here's the thing. You put it on the shelf, and then you notice in the jar, there seems to be quite a bit of foam on the top. Now, my wife would get that jar, uncap it, scrape off the foam, clean it out. And by the way, if it's just a little bit of foam, you don't like the look of it, you want to get it off, you put saran wrap, cling wrap right on the surface of it, and then you pull it out and all the bubbles come with it. Now, when you're looking at it, do the bubbles stay in suspension in the honey? That's not normal. That's not good. So let's say it does. And let's say in the upper third or so, there's a lot of foaminess, and the foam seems to be growing. And sometimes, if you're not super careful, if you really bottle this up and it did ferment and it is actively fermenting, you can burst the lid and get a real mess on your hands. So sometimes the foam just continues to grow and get thicker and thicker. That is 99% sure fermenting if that's what you're seeing. Okay. Now sometimes also you'll see it kind of separate a little bit. The top will seem really watery. And there's no doubt that it starts to smell like and taste like. So this is very important. It's honey after all. Just taste it. Does it taste like apple cider that's getting that zing to it as it starts to ferment. So high water, sugar content stuff definitely gets a zing, and it can begin to ferment. So if those things are going on, and by the way, every beekeeper, I don't care what level you're at, I highly, highly recommend you get a refractometer. And if that's the first time you've ever heard that word, find a new bee club to join. Refractometers, that's humor, I'm being funny. Refractometers are very important. You put your honey on that and you're going to know the water percentage. And my recommendation is anything over 18% should be dried down. Dehydrate that. Anything over 18%. So if you're at 18% or under, you're pretty good to go for the shelf life. So the thing of it is, your refractometer will tell you if you've got 19 to 20, very good chance of fermentation happening and your honey spoiling. Beyond 20% water, 99% guaranteed it's going to ferment. So now what do you do with it? Well, you cook with it or something like that. It's really not reversible, but could you stop it? Could you stop it in its tracks? You start to see it happening. You don't yet know what to do with it, but you definitely don't want that to continue, and you want to arrest the yeast exactly in its current state. Put it in the freezer. It doesn't freeze. It just goes to a temperature where all that activity stops. So that works. And then when you figure out what you're going to do, maybe you want to make some mead, by the way. Where would you go to see how mead is made from honey? Honey, water, yeast. It couldn't be simpler. So you go to the Frederick Dunn YouTube channel and you look in the top right of the home page. You see the little hourglass or magnifying glass there. Not the hourglass. That means you got a slow internet. But the magnifying glass. And you type up in there how to make mead. And I show you step by step. It is so easy. I have bottles of it right here. Mead is good. It's probably the oldest fermented beverage. And you can make it. So if it is, at that point, that's what you do with it. But you may have no problems with it at all. It could just be sometimes it tastes a little sour, it has a little bite to it, tastes a little tangy, but the smell of the alcohol is kind of a tell, but it will continue to off-gas and it'll continue to foam up and then it can foam over. Please avoid that. Get a refractometer. That's it. Question number 3. This is from Joe Bianco, YouTube channel name. Says, at the very end of your talk, you mentioned insulated covers. I made 5 insulated covers for my 5 colonies. Each cover has 3-inch thick foam in it, 1/8 inch foam reflective, and 3/8 inch plywood. The walls are 3/4 inch wood. There is a 1-inch space for fondant. I'm planning on wrapping the hive body with tar paper for winter. No upper entrance for ventilation. I run 2 deep brood boxes. And what's my opinion? Okay, so here's the thing. Tar paper, aka roof felt. Many of you don't know, I designed and built my own home. And I don't mean I had a contractor. My wife and I built it. And that's not a flex. That's not to, say, whoa, look at us. Well, I can tell you what, I'm still dry right now. It's holding up. And one of the things is you look at roof felt, and roof felt is what people call tar paper. And then you get a choice, 15-pound roof felt, 30-pound roof felt. What does that mean? Why is it even 15 and 30 pound? What are these ratings? Well, if you cut a 10-foot by 10-foot square of it, it would either weigh 15 pounds for a 10 by 10 or 30 pounds by a 10 by 10. Which one do you think I went with? Because I'm doing it myself. I never want to do it again. I don't want to climb up on that roof. Again, 30-pound felt. So back in the day, see, that's a really old method, been around a long time. So when people were wrapping hives way back in the day, they thought it would be a good idea to wrap it with tar paper, aka roof felt. And when you did that, what you did is you cut down on the wind getting into your hive. Some people fold it over the top and then put the telescoping lid on it if you had the most basic Langstroth hive. And they would say, oh, and when the sun comes out and it shines on it, it's going to heat it up and your bees are going to be able to move around inside. And that's true. So you get some solar gain from it. But I want you to know, because a lot of people are thinking about this right now, what are we going to do when the weather gets colder? How do I get my bees through winter? And as discussed here, I agree with all the stuff because it's stuff that I do here. I also have no top venting, and I have an insulated inner cover. This is way more insulation than probably any of my hives have had on them. And what I do is I get to a point where what I'm doing with the bees, where I live in the snow belt, by the way, what's getting them through winter, and what is the situation when spring arrives inside each hive. At some point, we almost don't need to do more based on where you're living than I currently do based on what I see in spring. I don't need to boost my colonies in spring. They're way ahead of me. Their populations are big. They're out of control. This is why we have so many bees here. And so do I need to wrap something around the side walls of my hive? And would it help the bees? Well, tar paper, solar gain. So we get those, by the way, the southern exposures are going to get the heat because the sun is low and it shines back when it's shining, and it hits the tar paper and heats it up. And yes, bees will start to move around. In fact, they'll start to migrate to that warmer wall. So it can actually, in your beehive, if this is the southern wall, your cluster can start to move towards that on a nice warm day. And if you get a series of warm days, they can begin to occupy your resources right against that wall. And then what we get here, though, and the reason I know it is because I also have solar power. We'll get weeks of almost no solar power, which means no solar gain for the hive. So what happens is this offers a windbreak, that's a plus. An opportunity to warm the hive when the sun is shining on it, that's a plus. And beyond that, zero insulation properties, zero insulation value. So I would like to present an alternative for you, because sometimes what happens too is it'll get cold. So then you say, well, then it's no better off or worse off than if you didn't have anything wrapping on it. Unless some people report this shift over to the southern wall or the warm wall, and then they're off center where they normally would be if everything else were even. So I'm going to say, plus it's usually good for about one season. So roof felt exposed to the weather, remember, is designed to have shingles over the top of it, which protect it and everything else. And it just helps. So anyway, wrapping it on your beehive, you're going to get maybe a season out of it. Maybe two if you really push it. But it doesn't hold up exposed to the weather very well on its own. Inexpensive. It's cheap stuff. Some people just staple it onto things. So I personally don't do it, but if I wanted to wrap a hive, I just want to share with you what I would use. So we know that I am a little bit obsessed with the foil-faced bubble insulation. Reflectix is one, double bubble is another, and then there's just single bubble, which also has the foil facing on it. That stuff lasts a long time. It holds up to weather. I put it out in weather over the past couple of years just to see how does it hold up. And so you can actually wrap your hive with it. So you can overlap it, you can use twine, you can use anything you want to tie it up. Paracord works really good. And so the same thing, you can blouse it over the top, put your lid on, and here's the difference. First of all, it's reflective. So initially you might say, well, no solar gain. Where the sun's just going to reflect off of it, and it's not going to absorb the heat the way it needs to, and that's true. But what it does do is provides a thermal wrap. And even the simple single bubble version, the thinnest stuff like Reflectix, right? If you wrap that on there, that's like adding another 3/4 inch piece of pine around the outside of your hive. So now you have 1.5 inches of wood just from one additional layer. And if you make a couple layers on there, it doubles each time. So it's just like adding another layer of 3/4 inch pine wood. So when you wrap it up and use string like that, it keeps the hive snug, warm, wind barrier day and night, even when weeks of sunshine. Sun doesn't happen. So if I were going to wrap something, I'd go insulation over, hoping for thermal gain, which, by the way, ends just as quick as the storm arrives. And then I have to dispose of it somewhere. By the way, not biodegradable. Neither of them are, though, so we can make that argument. Argue with yourself always when you're offering an alternative. So because it has often, look up the materials and the composition of roof felt. See what it's impregnated with. And it's not something you're going to chop up and throw in your garden for decomposition. You're going to put it in the dumpster. Just like your plastic wraps and stuff like that, they all will probably go the same way. But the difference being that if you use the Reflectix or the double bubble, you're going to get many years out of it before it's worn out and done. So, get the insulation valve. That's what I recommend between the two. No temp spikes, no sudden shifts on your bees, and they benefit from the insulation. So that's the thing. And here's what I gauge everything on. Keep in mind, I've been doing lots of hive testing, configuration testing. I don't shift everything all at once. So if you're a backyard enthusiast and you really want to know, is one better than the other? Do both. Do both. Take half your hives, wrap half of them with 30 or 15 pound roof felt, and then take the other one and wrap it with Reflectix and see what happens. See how the different hives do. Hopefully you're picking colonies that are roughly the same going into winter. And now we have a practical comparison. Is it going to be the final answer? No. But you will know which one consumed more resources. What was the shape of the cluster? Now, if you're doing thermal scans on hives, you can still do those at night with a tar paper wrap. Because at night, remember, no thermal block at all. You'll see where your cluster is. Go to do thermal scans on your double bubble or your Reflectix. You might see it if it's like wicked cold, as they would say up in Vermont. If it was in the 20s or something like that, you went out at night, did a thermal scan, you will see proof of life, but you won't see clearly maybe exactly where the cluster is located. You might have to peel it back to do that, if that's important. So, once again, 50-50, do half of them, see what happens. Test it, be a backyard scientist. I think that's great. Okay, next, I got questions from lots and lots of people. Okay, 3. Because I'm testing out the Keepers Hive. So I have the 2 colony system, so 2 bee hives, 2 colonies, merged together, central riser, 10 frame, honey super. Okay. So people are writing me going, hey, I'm trying to buy those. Are they out of business? Did they quit? Everything's out of stock. And by everything, I mean the 2 colony system. It seems like whatever you're personally looking for is out of stock. So I actually wrote to them because I wanted to know myself, because I also went to the website. There's no way they're out of stock. And they were, but they're not now. So they're back in stock. So they're not going out of business. They're still there. And so I do have another question today about the Keepers Hive. So I guess I'll answer that part. But for now, they're not out of business. That is something that they're still doing. And they have it back in stock. So for those of you who are looking for those, they have them. They're not quitting. And along that line, there seems to be a bunch of concern about stuff that's going out of stock, because I guess people are shopping right now. Because recently, by recently I mean it was yesterday or the day before, I don't even remember which, I've blocked it out, they're all blurred together. But I took a hive, the Lyson hive, because it takes up a lot of space. It's a poly hive. It's insulated, and I was at the West Virginia conference as a presenter, and in the showroom there was Dr. David Peck from Better Bee, and he had this rapid hive by Lyson. So it just has these dovetail things, they all go together. Anyway, and it's got thick sidewalls, and I generally am not super excited about them because they don't have the things I want to see in a beehive. And at this stage of my beekeeping experience or life or whatever you want to call it, I have certain things I want to see in a beehive. One, is there a feeder? So in the past I didn't have a decent feeder, and I've had Lysons before, and I just kind of passed through. It was something I tested for a while, and then I give them away, which is what I often do. See, people think I'm really being generous, but I'm clearing the way for something else. But it is generosity, it counts, because I care enough to give the things I don't want anymore to other people. But here's what happens. They had the bottom board with the screen in it. What do I like to see in a bottom board with a screen in it? An insert or a solid bottom board under the screen. No open screen to the outside. Okay, they have it. Cool. They had a feeder on it. They did not have a good feeder before. I did not like their hive top feeders before. And now they did. They had a really good one that's good for solid or liquid. Bonus. That's a win. So I got it. So I set it up. But here's the thing. They take up a lot of room. They're super lightweight. You can pick them up so easy. And recently a few questions have come out about it, like how durable are they? Can you strap it? Can you put it on a truck? You know, people are doing migratory beekeeping. Here's the thing. If you're a number cruncher, let's say, I don't know, in some weird world, let's say fuel is really expensive. Then you have to think about the weight that you're hauling in your truck. So a standard 18-wheeler that does pollinator services might be carrying in the neighborhood of 440 hives. Now we're backyard beekeepers. These aren't issues that we have to face. But it plays when it comes to these polystyrene hives because they're so much lighter in weight. And in fact, you would be removing a ton. That's 1,200 pounds from a shipment of 440 some odd beehives. That is significant savings in fuel if you're going to drive through any place that's got a grade at all that you're going to be using your tractor to pull these trucks uphill. So it saves a lot of money. Now, are they durable? I don't know. I don't do things that challenge their durability, but there is someone, there's Sophia. If you don't know who Sophia is, she's the bee drover in Australia, and she drives these massive trucks. And what kind of hives do they have in that operation for the bee drover? They have poly hives. What are they called? Hive IQ. So they're strapping them, loading them, unloading them, shipping them, hauling them everywhere. And why would she be using that particular kind of hive? A poly hive. Why would she, Sophia, be doing that? And they just call her Fia for short. Because her dad is the one that came up with Hive IQ. So they own the factory. So there it is. Apparently they're durable. And you save a lot of money in weight and stuff. You do have to think about these things. I don't think for a minute this isn't on my mind. At the end of use, where does it go? What happens to the material? Polystyrene is going to persist for a very long time. So if we're making our hives out of wood, if we're using wooden materials, this is the problem I have every time I look at something that happens to be made out of plastic. Wood degrades. Wood just returns to the environment. Plastics do not. They just kind of break down into finer and finer particles until they're so tiny that they're just almost everywhere. And so the more we contribute plastics to the environment, that is on my mind. Now, if you take a tour, as I once did, at a landfill, which is usually like the biggest mountain in some cities, you go to the landfill and you find out there's something called leachate, and they have to prove that they're locking everything in, that nothing can ooze out into the surrounding environment. And this is one of the reasons why waste management will charge you so much money for trash collection, is because they're really putting it somewhere where it is trapped. It's not going anywhere. So you can kind of feel okay about yourself if you buy something like that and it's plastic, and when it comes time to dispose of it, you dispose of it through a waste management system that prevents these materials from going out into the environment. So then, and others, you can look this up. Can polystyrene be recycled? Yes. And there are big companies that don't even have enough poly material to meet their demand for it, so that they can repurpose it for something else. So there are ways to feel good about the plastics, but they never disappear. They can change into something else, or they can be locked up and then not put out into the environment. But wood, you can just toss it in your garden. Like my old beehive boxes, I give them to my wife, and she uses them in her garden, and each individual box is a mini raised garden for specific plants, tomatoes, whatever you're growing out there. See how it can work? So wood is like the easiest. But then, you're saving fuel if you're a big commercial person, so you're cutting down on pollution at the same time you're creating a poly product. I don't know. I think the arguments of pros and cons can go on in perpetuity. Next question comes from Hunting Lady. Top Bar Hives don't need rain guards? It's true, they don't. And I drew a quick sketch. It's been a while since I've drawn a sketch. And this is what the end of a top bar hive looks like. Now, this particular top bar hive is different from some other top bar hives. But if you notice, what happens is, and this is for minimal carpentry. So this thing is made out of 2x10s. It's pretty clear. I know that Be Mindful has Amish people that build their hives. That's interesting. I don't know where the Amish people are in Texas. I don't know. But we have Amish people up here all over the place. Well, you know, on Amish farms, like not all over, but when you go to country fair or whatever to get gasoline, they're always in there getting treats and stuff because somebody's driving them around in a van. Anyway, moving on. The way the top bar hive works, it looks weird to me. And if you recall last year when I put one out there, of course, remember, snow belt. So you've got these side panels right here, and then you've got just the top bars. In other words, there's no other lid. There's the top bars. They're exposed. They're right there. So side, bottom, top bar, comb comes down and fills the space. Now above the top bars, there's a roof. And the roof extends past the length of the top bars. And then the side walls of the hive are such that rain and stuff doesn't even hit on it because it's going under. So it's dripping off on its own. Top bars drip down. Nothing drips onto the top bars because of this roof. And there's an air gap between it, which is weird. But it worked. And just to be, you know, faithful to the design, last winter, I didn't do anything to it. So I didn't, you know, instinctively, I wanted to put insulation on it. Maybe some of you would want to be wrapping roof felt on it or something. But it is thick material. This is full 2x stock. So these are 2x10s. And I don't know if you know about Amish carpentry, but when they make a 2x10, it's oddly 2 inches by 10 inches. When they make a 2x4, it's 2 inches by 4 inches. That's it. When we buy lumber, we don't get that full 2x4. Everything is an odd number, some different dimension because now it's finished. It's surface 4 sides, S4S. So anyway, and that's how it works. So anyway, you've got this gap of air, you've got this roof, you've got these top bars, and the weather just blows through. Spiders live up here. Have a jumping spider named Jasper that comes right out. If I'm picking something up, he tries to catch the bees that I'm looking at, which is pretty hilarious. Anyway, made it through winter just fine. So there are some things that, you know, I'm not super excited about because the supervisor and I, we just inspected all of the top bar hives because we're looking for honey, for comb honey, because apparently there are people that want it. Comb honey, who knew? We didn't get any. They, you know, there's more brood than anything else in these top bar hives. And everything was pretty decent. But I noticed that the top bars themselves, they warp a little bit. And then the bees fill the gaps with propolis, so that's not the end of the world. But I'd like to see them stay truer than they do, but we're definitely not getting any honey from any of the top bar colonies this year. They have what they need. Now last minute, you know, we're still in a big nectar flow. Maybe last minute they'll supercharge their production and all of a sudden end up with a whole bunch of honey somewhere. But comb after comb after comb, because they're not frames, they're just top bars, comb after comb, there is some brood on almost every single comb in there. And they came through winter ready to go. In fact, they generated swarms this year. Now, what would you do to help reduce the swarm generation? You would expand the colony, but we can't because they're a finite length. So that's what we end up with, not enough space. So if you're going to build one of those, by the way, no, they don't need, all this comes from the fact that, do they have rain guards? So no, they don't. They're exposed to the weather. So driving rain could actually get right in there. The snow never piled up in there, even though we had blowing snow. But keep in mind, we face the short end to the prevailing winds. It's broadside to the southern hemisphere. So that way it gets that winter sun that we were talking about earlier. And so we can talk about ways to insulate it, but there again, what did I say before? What is the condition of the bees when we get into springtime? Do they seem to be barely making it? Would they have benefited from more insulation or more space or better construction? So if they're coming out fully loaded, busting with bees, ready to forage, the minute skunk cabbage shows up in the wetlands, then why on earth do I want them to do more, build faster, bigger, better, sooner, so that I have to get out there like some of these people that I've seen in 45-degree weather working their hives because they're going to get away from them. And by get away from them, I mean build too fast and swarm at the very moment the weather breaks. Because beekeepers are waiting for the moment the weather breaks to go out and work with their hives. So if you get out there and the swarming is already happening, realize they've been planning that for quite a while. They can't make a queen that fast. Just from egg to adult, for a queen, they need 15 days. And then the queen has to mature, so there's another 9 or 10 days to mature and get mated. So they planned that way ahead. They knew what the weather was going to be better than your weather people whose job it is to know. But so what I'm saying is, does it need improvement? If it's not broken, what are we fixing? So bonus to be mindful, that thing worked, continues to work, and I bought another one. Of course, it's out there and it's full. All right, so the next question comes from Miki Carvalho. That's a YouTube channel name. What size hole do you use in the center of the super frames? Boom. Okay. This is a super frame. Extra. It doesn't mean like it can fly or anything. It's an above average frame that goes in your honey super. This hole right here. This is acorn foundation, which by the way, I use a hollow punch to punch these holes out, and I used to cut corners. Who doesn't in life? But anyway, these corners are perforated, and I spoke with people at a recent bee breakfast that said they have no problem just grabbing these corners and snapping them off. They didn't come off that easy for me. And one of the reasons that we realized that is this is a cutout from one of the plugs. I know you can't see it very well, but I want you to see how thick that material is. It is way thicker than you might expect. But that's acorn, heavy waxed foundation in a wooden frame. This hole right here is 1 inch. I have a hollow punch that's 1 inch and a 3/4 inch. And the thing of it is, when you punch this hole out, and we have a whole bunch of these frames side by side, and they're doing their work. If they don't like this hole, they're going to fill it with beeswax. They go right to work, no problem. And some people ask if they could use different saws and things like that to cut these holes. And my point of it was, keep in mind about the particulates, which are made out of plastic. If you use a saw and stuff that cuts away material as you go, or a scroll saw, something like that, it's going to create a bunch of little microplastic particles. I don't know where they go, how they end up, what's going on. But when you use a punch, it's just a clean cut through, and you have the piece that you take out. So when you put a whole bunch of them together, these holes line up. The bees go through here. They don't have to go up and over the top. They don't have to go around. They don't have to go underneath to get back up. Because if you look at when they're building comb, they'll build the comb out away from the face. That's what the heavy wax foundation is for. So spring for the extra, get the heavy wax. And then they'll start to build it out through the middle, and then they gradually spread out until they do all of these. So then while they're working through the middle, they also work the backside, the comb, through the middle first, and then the adjacent frame through the middle first. We're saving them steps by having these holes here. Now, I've been cutting corners in beekeeping for a while, and that works really well. But I want you to know, of course, there's a company that's making frames with these cutouts already. And that hole looks like it's about 1/2 inch. It's really small. And then the corners are all cut, which I used to take 10 snips and clip off every corner. But I noticed the one that seems the most useful to the bees is the one that's in the center and a little down from the top. And the reason we see that and know that is because when we're using foundationless frames, which you don't see in honey supers because foundationless, it's hard to spin it out unless you're going to make cut comb. So when it's foundationless, it's usually your brood frames. But by having the hole just a little down from the top, right there, and what they'll do is they'll fill it in until it's about the size of 1 or 2 cells. In fact, from the side profile, it starts to look just like any other honey or brood cell. The difference is you see a bee come out of it, and then you see another bee come out of it. And when I say see it, I mean it's because I have these also in my observation hives, because that's how I learn how bees use stuff. So the size of it isn't critical. So if you get a 3/4 inch punch or a 1/2 inch punch or something like that, and I recommend that you take a 4x4, stand it on its end. It could be 2 or 3 feet long. 2 feet's probably good. And then you set the frame on top of the 4x4 on the end grain, and then you hold your hollow punch and you hit it with your hammer and you cut one of these out, and you move on to the next one. And they work really well. So if you don't want to do that yourself and you want a frame that's going to last the rest of your beekeeping life, you get it from 21st Bee. And you're probably thinking, do I get something for that? Am I getting kickbacks from 21st Bee for mentioning them? No, they're the only company that sends you or sells you a frame with the punched out holes already. And they're heavy frames, by the way. So that's the size. I use 3/4 or 1 inch. The one I just showed you is 1 inch. Works great. No problem at all. So, and this is another question. This is related to the Keepers Hive. And if you don't know what that is, I did several videos of the Keepers Hive, setting it up myself, assembling it myself, installing the colonies, and of course interviewing George Dotto, Dr. George Dotto, who is one of the innovators. And then they have other people working with them that do great things. But the question here from Quentin Steffens is, I'm not sure I understand the point of this hive. As a double nuke? Maybe? And I think the double nuke reference comes from people in the northwestern part of the state of Vermont, like Michael Palmer, let's say, who winters double nukes. It's not like that. So here's the deal. Here's what it is, if you don't already know. The Keepers Hive, the single Keepers Hive or the double colony Keepers Hive, which right now is kind of in demand because of its high productivity with honey production. You put 2 colonies together, they share the common honey. I had questions about that myself. This is why I asked these questions, because I like to grill people. I like to ask them all the questions that I have that come to mind. That's why you should go to conferences, because you meet the people that come up with the innovations and you can pin them down with all of the things you want to know. So I said, you've got a queen over here in her colony, queen over here in her colony. There's a queen excluder here, so they can't go past, and there's a divider board inside the next box up from the bottom box. And so each side is separate until that point, but then there's a queen excluder above that, and now the workers all are working on the exact same honey storage area, the honey super. Why do they get along? So the answer I got was, they just get along. I didn't think that was a very good answer, but it's true. They just get along. So my colonies are proof of that. They're still doing it. And so what's different about it? Couldn't I just do this with any old, I could get 2 10-frame boxes, put them side by side, create a shim that covers the exposed area when I shift them over to a single riser beyond that, because now I have roughly half of each box going up. The way theirs is built, there's a center column or support box in the middle of it, and then they build out from there. And they've got these little rails. This is the difference. There are these little rails and glass over the top of it. So you can pull open one side and you can see the number of bees that are in it, kind of see what the activity is. They upgraded the glass by quite a lot from the first Keepers Hive that came out, which I also got. And they didn't give me the 2-queen system. I bought the 2-queen system. I know that's important to say because some people might think maybe I was swayed with presents. I wouldn't have refused one if they wanted to give it to me, but I bought it as part of the fundraiser campaign because I like to support innovations that I think are interesting. So then you can go to the side, flip it open, see what your bees are doing. You want to see more than that, you pull the glass off. After you've pulled the glass off, you pull the sides off. The sides are shaped like this and they cover the wings or ends of the top bar of your Langstroth frames. And when you pull that away, now we slide them along because the bees didn't have access to heavily propolize them. So you can pull them out to the side, look at the brood. I highly recommend you have a Hive Butler tote sitting next to you. And you can put the frames in that while you're looking at these frames. Look at them all, see the status of the queen, see the brood status. Then line them all back up, push them all back in, put the sides back on, the glass on top of that, close the lid. You can insulate that lid in wintertime, which I just put rolled up double bubble in there, and they both came through winter, not surprisingly, just fine. Now you have to put your own bottom boards on there, so that gives you a chance to do it. And that's it. Improved honey production. But the difference between any standard or double nuke system or something like that is your accessibility to the brood area without having to pull off these upper boxes to find out what's going on. And you need to, by the way, get into those brood boxes every 1 to 2 weeks if you want to make sure that propolis isn't still connecting those things together. I have the standalone hive, no problem. The 2 colony system, one side, no problem, because I'm not getting in them every 1 or 2 weeks. I'm just not. And the other side, my western side colony, had really propolized everything in there. So I had to spend quite a lot of time sitting there and scraping it all off. I could still get it moved, but it took some effort. So you're supposed to get in it routinely, inspect the brood, know the status of your queen, and the same people that built that highly recommend your Demery control method for reducing congestion in your brood area and keeping your colony from swarming. So I just wanted to say all of that. So again, it's supposed to help you not have to lift everything, but then you are lifting again once the time to harvest honey comes. And if you're getting the double colony system, get ready. You're going to be lifting heavy boxes full of honey. So, and I highly recommend that if you have Flow Supers, that would be a great candidate for a colony to put that on. And right now, if you're curious about that, my Flow Supers are at roughly 70% finished. So by the day, I think it's Wednesday that I said was going to be the best day next week, we'll be looking at the Flow Supers too and getting some honey off of this. It's time. We're at the end of the year. So we're in the Fluff section right now, if you don't already know. And I want to caution you, robbing risks are going to increase rapidly here. Because the nectar flow is going to wrap up, colonies are maxing out, and hopefully you've been watching a video up in the corner here that has it's just a landing board of one of the hives starting at 9 o'clock this morning, and I videoed it for roughly 2 hours just to make sure I would have enough, and clearly have more than enough. But it shows the amount of pollen that's coming in. That translates into what? Brood building. Because what they're going to start building right now are going to be the fat-bodied winter workers. Those are bees that don't live your standard 6 weeks, they live 6 months. And your bees are going to depend on those to get them through. So nutrition has to be at its peak right now. That's what you're seeing. The colony waking up, doing its foraging, bringing in really cool loads of pollen. Hope it's not ragweed. Although ragweed pollen is supposed to be really good protein, by the way, which is why the deer eat the tops of it too. So robbing, just be concerned, and by that I mean it seems counterintuitive, but you can still reduce your entrances and your bees can defend themselves, because coming up soon is not just a robbing from other honeybees. You're going to start to see more and more vespids. You're going to see wasps. They're going to come. They're going to be pinging your hives, because keep in mind what I said, it got really cold last night. The bees aren't flying immediately in the morning, but guess what is? The wasps are. They fly colder than your honeybees. And so they try to get in. My magic entrance size is 3/8 of an inch high by 3 to 4 inches wide. And it's also time to start closing up those flow hive entrances too, which are 3/8 completely across by design, which I thought was pretty cool. And the other thing is the Lyson hive that I just set out there, also 3/8 of an inch in their standard opening. Good stuff. Why 3/8? Mice can't get into it. So that's good news. Keep an eye on those mice. And I'm doing a conference too, not this weekend, but next weekend. In what state? In Ohio. It's going to be fun. I'll tell you more about that next Friday. Okay, so taking honey Wednesday, so that's coming. Because you want to take your honey early enough that you can put the supers back on, have the bees clean it up, get your stuff in storage, and the bees now have to backfill for the remaining weeks to make sure that they have what they need for wintertime. And here's the tightrope we walk, because we want to do that just in time, and we want them to be bag filling, but not enough to where they become honey bound and actually kick off another swarm too late in the year to do anything. So don't forget about the seed bargains, and your best day is Wednesday. If you have questions for me, don't forget to write them down right in the comment section of this video. You can also go to thewaytobee.org, click on the page marked contact, and submit your topic there. And don't forget to, I know I'm saying this at the very end, but this is also a podcast. Now, YouTube has a podcast, so you can look up The Way to Bee, questions and answers on YouTube for the podcast. You can also go to The Way to Bee podcast. Just Google it, you'll find it. So many carriers have it right now. Even Amazon has it, which is funny because you don't get a dime for that. It's just totally free. You just do the podcast. So I want to thank you for being here. I hope you got one useful thing out of today's Q&A. And I just wish you all the best with your bees. And I hope you have a great weekend. I'm Frederick Dunn, and this has been The Way to Bee.